Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Robots and Red Tape. As always, I am your host, Nick Schutt, here with my friend Luke Einsel today. Luke, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Dude, thanks for being here, man. I really appreciate it. Really appreciate your story and you taking the time to come on. I know how busy you are. So for everybody that doesn't have the privilege of knowing you yet, will you tell folks a little bit about yourself, your background, and kind of how you got here and what you're doing?
Well, that's a really fun story and probably why we connected.
Hmm.
I've been an entrepreneur for about 15 years. Got into entrepreneurship because the recession happened in '08 and said, "Hey, I had this crazy idea. Maybe I can do better than what I was seeing on the market," and put that to the test. And it's been a long ride, but here I am, and got a lot of stories over the last 15 years of navigating really complex, difficult situations to uh, get in front of you and your audience and share what revelations I got out of that journey
Hmm.
and how I want to help people on this next journey of my life.
Absolutely, man. No, it's fantastic. And so what was your first company?
Yeah, so my first company was specifically in healthy beverage. I had this idea after Michelle Obama passed the Healthy Hungry Kids Act of 2010. I said, man, what an opportunity to get involved and do something positive, put healthy beverages in school districts across the country. Started a company initially called Thirsty Coconut because I didn't
Hmm.
know any better and it sounded like a fun name.
Yeah.
Made a lot of mistakes, tried a lot of different things, but eventually was replacing Coke and Pepsi in school districts across the country, and got really big, really fast. Had to do a lot of creative things to keep up with the growth. How do you raise money to fund this beast? And yeah, like we can go into some of those crazy things, but like we started liquidating C stores across the country
Hmm.
to lower my capex so I could grow faster. Borrowed a lot of money
Hmm.
when borrowing money was really cheap. Borrowed about $10 million personally
Hmm.
to fund this business. Got to the point where we had liquidated most of the C stores in North America and came across an opportunity to liquidate 7-Eleven in Mexico.
Hmm.
Um, Liquidated 3,200 convenience stores, rented a train, loaded all that beverage equipment onto a train, shipped it to Kansas City, where I'm based out of, started a massive refurbishing operation, and then was able to give away all this equipment for free to school districts across the country and go national.
It's amazing. That's amazing, man. And how'd you go from the healthy beverage space to AI and FileStory?
Oh, that's where it gets really interesting. So yeah, back in 2020, my company depended on a lot of different vendors, depended on a lot of third parties to do things. And one of my biggest suppliers was acquired by a hedge fund.
Hmm.
And that's kind of where it started this downward spiral of how I got into AI. And the short of it is, I found myself in a David versus Goliath legal battle with a hedge fund and multiple subsidiaries of theirs. They wanted me to do things that I didn't want to do, and I believe in free will and autonomy, and they weren't good decisions for my company, so I ended up going a different direction. I ended up partnering with a publicly traded company called Barfresh
Hmm.
and took a different path. And then I had three federal lawsuits I was staring down the barrel of in 2020, and man, it was crazy.
I bet. I bet. And I mean, you and I both know that legal fees are very, very expensive, and can get very expensive very quickly. And I would guess that that's part of why they decided to put these lawsuits on you is you're not going to play ball the way we want you to. You're going to take the business and run elsewhere. So we're just going to sue you until you can't afford to be in business anymore.
Yeah, that or you break
Hmm.
right and you change, and now you're going to play ball how we want you to play ball, and that's just not how I operate. I've never been one. I grew up on a farm in western Kansas. Life has always been, had its challenges, and yeah, so unfortunately, in a legal battle, it comes down to resources,
Hmm.
and you got people that have billions of dollars in resources. They've got an army of attorneys
Hmm.
to go through this, especially paperwork, document review, motions. You go down. It's a massive orchestration of knowledge work
Hmm.
that is really hard to overcome. And then, you're looking at multiple firms. One of those firms sued the NFL and won almost $1 billion judgment
Wow.
uh, from the NFL. So, you're playing in the big leagues. And here I go from an entrepreneur who really didn't know a whole lot to, this massive legal battle with a multi-billion-dollar entity, attorneys who've had success against the NFL,
Hmm.
uh, multiple firms, and you're sitting in a courtroom with you and a single attorney and maybe a paralegal, and on the other side you've got full table, full
Hmm.
of suits, and literally a David versus Goliath battle.
And how did the fight go?
Well, uh, this has been a multi-year fight,
Hmm.
and I've been through, when people get into legal battles, most 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 cases settle,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
Uh, hey, we're going to find a middle ground, right? Maybe we were wrong, maybe you were wrong. We're going to find a way to settle this because it's just not worth racking up millions of dollars in legal fees.
Hmm.
But if one party isn't acting in good faith, it becomes really hard to settle, especially if they have, if the intention isn't to resolve conflict and it's to uh, pour gasoline on the fire.
Hmm.
Uh, it it becomes really contentious. And so, you look at the statistics, 2% of federal cases go to trial.
Hmm.
And I've been to trial 3 times. Uh,
In the last 3 years, last 4 years.
since 2020. So yeah, the last 5 years, I've been through 3 federal trials, start to finish,
Hmm.
the whole process. And I won the first 2 trials in St. Louis Federal Court. And then we had a trial in Houston.
Hmm.
And, just to give a little bit background about those, the first 2 trials were about employees that I hired that had non competes that I had an attorney review.
Hmm.
No issues with the non competes. I hired these employees and had to take those to trial, won those outright. But it put a
Hmm.
lot of strain and pressure on those employees, trying to get them to settle or flip against me to say, okay, you know what, the cost isn't worth it, so I'm gonna turn and I'm gonna cooperate, right,
Hmm.
and then I'm gonna bury my current employer. And man, I'm going to tell you, these 3 people stuck through all the way to the end, and we won each one of those federal trials. And then the next one was against me personally, and there were crazy allegations that I was rigging federal bids,
What?
uh, to unfairly compete against a hedge fund and its subsidiaries,
Hmm.
uh, like terrible allegations. And so those went to trial in March of last year. And not only did I successfully defend against those outrageous claims, I got convictions of violations of the U.S. Trade Secrets Act with
Hmm.
punitive damages and violations of the Uniform Missouri Trade Secrets Act with punitive damages. So I went from a situation of trying to defend myself in this to outright winning and getting convictions against these entities for stealing my trade secrets.
Hmm.
And that's just scratching the surface. We still got one more to go. Uh, get your popcorn out. It's going to happen next January.
Hmm.
But that's kind of where we're leading into of the power of being able to go through hundreds of thousands of documents and really understanding what's really going on. What's reality? What's the
Yep.
truth?
Hmm. Yeah, man.
And it empowered me to be in the position of uh, the next step of being able to go on the offensive and not just clear my name, right, but uh, win the next battle and put this to bed.
It's amazing, dude. It's amazing. And so how did you equalize the playing? How did you level the playing field? If it's you, one attorney, maybe a paralegal against, a room full of suits that I would assume are all like, all came out of top schools and all have a lot of experience. And if it's a big, big hedge fund, they're going to have like the partners out there that, bill at what, 12, $1,500 an hour and are at least I would assume. I don't know how much hedge funds pay their attorneys, to be honest with you. But
A
how did you
lot.
even yeah, yes, enough for them to do things like this. How did you level the playing field and how did you turn it from, what is frankly and could have been something that destroyed somebody's life into FileStory?
Into the next chapter.
Yes.
Well, first of all, I got lucky, and the lucky part is that AI was starting to come into its own.
Hmm.
And the other second lucky part I had was I've got really good friends, really smart friends, especially in AI. And I posed this question to them: how do I overcome my biggest problem, which is I've got a bunch of information. I can't upload it into Chat GPT, right?
Hmm.
I can't use a public because a lot of information is either protected under court order, right? It may have HIPAA aspects to it. It may be classified, right? Like you've got sensitive information you can't say, or maybe my trade secrets, and I don't trust that a big AI company is going to protect that private data
Hmm.
and 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 if my neck's on the line, so I had to go build it myself. And
Hmm.
so I surrounded myself with some top talent, and we created FileStory. And FileStory used essentially agentic AI in its infancy to
Hmm.
build out the tools to go through massive amounts of private data and discover, right? Because we don't know what we're looking for,
Hmm.
discover those needles in a haystack and relevant information to empower me to make the best decisions and ultimately compete unfairly in a David versus Goliath situation.
Absolutely. And so that's amazing that you are able to surround yourself with that and like the agentic system. Agentic AI is fascinating and I still very much in its infancy. So what can you say? What is File Story? What do you guys do? And what real problem do you solve for folks?
Yeah, so let's go into what FileStory is. FileStory initially was a world-class investigative tool using agentic AI.
Hmm.
And agentic AI has its limitations, but what we found out was we can get multiple agents to do multiple different tasks. And that's a kind of a secret that we've discovered with agentic AI is if you ask AI to do too much, it's going to hallucinate, you're going
Hmm.
to get inaccurate results. And so you got to break up that work into smaller bite-sized chunks so that you get the performance you want out of AI. And so that journey started with training AI to do very specific tasks to replicate high performers. Because if I don't have the talent around me, if I don't have the top attorneys, if I don't have the top paralegals, if I don't have the top business minds around me to process and to understand to do this information, well, I can build out an agentic system to supercharge the people I do have.
Hmm.
And so I create a small, focused team that's empowered by AI to do the work of 10, 50, 100 people.
Hmm.
And it's amazing like
That is
what
awesome.
we were able to do and then build on top of that to become what File Story is. It changed my life. It saved my life,
Hmm.
and it helped me. Like I don't know very many people that have been in my situation that came out on top against a multi-billion-dollar entity and win. It's
Yeah,
all about winning.
absolutely. And being able to win and using, AI and agentic AI to help with that is amazing. And like side note, like just the development of this technology and the speed at which it has developed is incredible. Like so, 10 years ago now, I was involved in a program at Department of Justice that was like at the time it was cutting edge tech where essentially when they were looking at prosecuting these large cases, right? Like the one at the time, the big one that was hot at the time was the Volkswagen case, where they got caught with the emission scandal, and they got caught where anytime you so when you plugged in the emissions reader, it would change the performance of the car to make sure that it hit EPA standards. Um, and anytime you're doing that, and like you definitely know this, is like when you get discovery, you get millions and millions of documents, right? And in this case, the tool that we were building, all it did was emails, right? Because like somewhere between 51 and 58%, 59% of emails on a work server are not work related. And the only thing that we were trying to do, and it was like built in Hadoop, and it was like, oh, like we were doing a lot of work in like file indexing and making sure like search indexing and making sure that we could go in and like look through all of these. And the only thing we were doing is taking all of the business related emails and non-business related emails and moving them apart, right? And that's it. And to go from that being cutting edge tech in 2014, 15, 16 to, 5 years later, cutting edge tech is where you were and allowed you to do, you know, allowed you to compete against these massive law firms in a way that you just have no business. You had no business competing with them from a resource perspective, from like a talent perspective. Not saying anything against your attorneys, but there's just not like there's levels to it, right? And you and I can't afford the
Absolutely.
attorneys that they can, right?
Yeah, and that's what gets me really excited about AI is I see AI, uh, and I'm going to go more into your question about what FileStory is, but
Hmm.
what AI gets me excited about it is it allows people, it levels the playing field uh, in this competition for resources. It allows people to operate at a much higher level, and it lowers the cost significantly.
Hmm.
But to get there, right, you've got to build a really complex situation, especially for this situation. You've got private data, and
Hmm.
that has to be protected at all costs. And that's we see hacks from the Treasury Department, from banks,
Hmm.
from solar winds, right? You go through this, like security is like really, really important, and privacy.
Absolutely. I mean, what was it? You remember the CrowdStrike hack that happened over the summer that shut down air travel, like, 13, 14, 15% of air travel across the country. I don't remember the percentage. It was a bunch of air travel. And then, I mean, you look at all the ransomware attacks that happen, a lot in the medical space, right? Uh,
Exactly. So you got to you. So there's a trust. There is a major trust issue right now with AI. And
mm-hmm,
there's a lot of companies that want to use AI. There's people like me that want to use AI, but there's this trust gap. And that was the first thing that we set out to solve with FileStory is this has got to be done in a private environment. It's got to be incredibly secure, and
mm-hmm,
it's got to operate with the highest levels of security because uh, obviously we're talking about the ramifications of getting it wrong. It can be disastrous, not just to an individual, but to an entire country.
mm-hmm,
And so that trust has to always be like top of mind.
absolutely.
And that's how we built File Story out was at a foundational level. Some of the people that I get to work with are world experts in what they do. My CTO was managing 80% of the biometric data in the United States at one point,
Incredible. It's incredible.
right? you
Mm-hmm,
can't let that you can't let that information get out. So file story, right, is a system that manages both public and private data in the most secure fashion with multiple layers of AI.
mm-hmm,
Uh, Agentic AI is obviously our strongest suit,
mm-hmm,
but what that led into was a system we call CETO. which is a collaborative expert task orchestration
Hmm.
AI that manages multiple AI agents, sometimes 20, maybe hundreds of AI agents that do very specific tasks that break that work up, that does it accurately, efficiently, and quickly while protecting that data. And
Hmm.
it allows somebody to use it without fear that that's going to come back and bite them.
Hmm. Absolutely. And so, for folks that don't know, and correct me if I'm wrong, agentic AI differs from LLMs because like language models is just language. It's just interacting, it's asking questions. Agentic and the agents are actually performing a task. Can you give us some examples of what some of those tasks could be in an agentic system?
Oh, absolutely. We could train an agent, right? And I will say this, like there, let's take one step. I'm going to present my view of AI,
Okay.
right? And I
Please.
think that
I'd
there's
love
two
that.
different, yeah, like at a high level because I've been in this long enough, and it's really confusing because there's uh, different ways that people use AI, and most people are familiar with OpenAI,
Hmm.
right, or Gemini, something that they can get access to and uh, you know ask it a question, and now you've got this big public database. So with uh, like we're going to call that RAG, right? Retrieval augmented generation,
Hmm.
and that's based mainly on public data. You're ingesting all this information into this giant black box,
Hmm.
and it's a very, very large model run on lots of servers.
Hmm.
And we don't necessarily know what happens in that black box at all times. It's gotten a lot better.
Hmm.
You know, the progression has been unbelievable, but it's not always accurate. And you
Hmm.
get problems with accuracy, you get problems with hallucinations,
Hmm.
and we saw a very different path to take, which is the smaller model LLM, which becomes an agent.
Hmm.
And that, can be 7 million. It's a much smaller model that can be a tool, right, to interact with.
So instead of having the large language models, like I mean, like any of them, like Bard or Gemini now, I guess it is,
Yeah,
and ChatGPT, Claude, all these guys, they have essentially the entire internet and more as far as data. But if you're doing a very specific task, you don't need all of that information. And I would assume that having all of that can, like, that's like too much information. It can cause hallucinations there. I don't know that for a fact. When you're asking for something very, very specific. And so what you're saying is essentially training like a small language model that does a very specific task, and you only give it information related to the specific task that you want it to perform.
yeah. It for us, it fundamentally transforms like document review,
Hmm.
and we do it by creating like specialized AI team members. We've started to look at these as like digital team members, and they've got distinct roles and expertise.
Hmm.
And unlike general AI, which you've got these broad capabilities, but it lacks specification. FileStory's agents are purpose built for specific functions within. We're going to use document review, so like the review process. That specialized review or the approach is more effective because each agent focuses on mastering a specific aspect of document review. It could be pattern recognition, it could be compliance verification, it could be contextual understanding. And then the trick is getting those agents to coordinate their work through a structured workflow.
Hmm.
And that workflow, it can't be so alien to like how humans normally work because
Hmm.
we're in that workflow. And the team-based approach, it allows parallel processing with appropriate handoffs between specialists. And
Hmm.
so it's almost like I've got a team behind the scenes that supercharges and empowers me to do things that are outside of my normal skill level. And those agents, they maintain like consistent focus and quality across this massive document collection.
Hmm.
And then these coordinated teams can preserve context across the entire process. And you don't have to, like when we look at like how a traditional massive discovery operation would work,
Mhm.
and since you've done it, you may have a team of 50 paralegals all reviewing, you know, 2,000 documents,
Yeah.
5,000 documents, 10,000. Well, you got
That's
to
why.
take all that information
Mhm.
and bring it together, and things are going to be lost. There's going to
Mhm.
be human error,
Mhm.
and an LLM, or well, I'll say this: how we built FileStory, all of that knowledge work, it condenses together, and you don't have those gaps of where
Mhm.
you've got to coordinate all these human minds to collate all this information into one narrative.
Mhm. Absolutely. So I've done it, but can you explain a little bit about like how the general, a general discovery process works, right? I mean, this is why litigation support is so big, right? But can you explain to having, you've walked through it way more than I have, Luke. Explain kind of
I've had to do it. Yeah,
how does it? Yeah, you've done
it's
it, right?
terrible.
Yeah, it's reading
Uh,
millions of documents.
yeah, so we're going to do a thought experiment,
Okay.
and we're going to just take a small sample size. Let's say like 50,000 documents,
Mm-hmm.
right? And a human can only ingest so much information in 1 hour. And we're going to use an hour because it's a standard that we're all used to.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe a proficient human can go through 50 documents per hour. And we're talking complex documents, right? You're talking about the emission scandal. It takes a lot of mental energy to go through that document and understand, is anything relevant in this document?
Mm-hmm.
So you've got to create kind of a structured database within this information. Maybe it goes into a spreadsheet, maybe it
Mm-hmm.
goes into a yellow legal pad, and you're taking all this information and you're saying, like, hey, document 3059
Mm-hmm.
contains something potentially relevant, and you mark it down,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's like the old school way of doing it. And now you've got this, like, maybe a massive spreadsheet or a massive database, and it's only as good as the human that's inputting that data, and
Mm-hmm.
it's really slow. So if you've got 50,000 documents and you can only go through 50 documents an hour, that's a lot of hours, right? That's 1,000 hours of
Mm-hmm.
human work just to get to step one of
Mm-hmm.
ingesting a massive data set like that.
Right. And then, also I would assume that as you work through this process, things that you didn't think were going to be relevant become relevant because you see them across all these documents. But how, if you're not marking that down, then like you're not going to capture that information. And and humans make a lot of errors, especially in highly detailed work, right? That's why, like, when you look at the companies that do like data tagging for a living, they have limits on the amount of time you can spend actually working on a daily basis because you're going to be less effective after a certain point.
Absolutely. I've done this, right? Hey,
Hmm.
that one document said this thing, and now it's important, and I didn't think it was important initially, and now I got to go back and find it.
Hmm.
And finding that document is worse than when you saved a file and you didn't think it was important and you didn't think to label it importantly. And now
Hmm.
you're digging through your entire hard drive trying to find that one file that you
Hmm.
thought was really important, except now it could be in a stack of 50,000 or a million or, how many ever documents. And you got to do all this extra work to go back and try and locate this one specific document.
Hmm.
And that's where AI shines.
Yep. And so figure 50,000 documents, which is a small case, 50 documents an hour. It's what, 1,000 hours, if I'm doing math correctly.
Yep.
Uh, for document review, which for folks that don't know is 6 months of full-time work. Um, how quickly can FileStory do that?
A matter of hours now.
Okay, so you took something that takes 1,000 hours down to like 5 or 10.
Yeah, and you can ingest it, right? And that's the beauty, right? We've got this multi-agentic layer system that extracts all that data. It
Hmm.
organizes it into a very structured way. You don't lose any of that data. And then once you're going through that data, you can ask specific questions. You can build workflows around that. You can look for patterns. We did suspicious language detection. We've got a suspicious language detection
Mm-hmm.
AI that looks for suspicious language patterns because
Mm-hmm.
people talk differently when they're doing things they shouldn't be doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, everything else becomes much more vague. And did you talk to the guy about the thing instead of, hey, did you follow up with so and so client about so and so? Because, y'all need to know. Is like, yeah, I totally get it. That's really cool though. That you were able to
Yeah.
build that. Uh,
And we tested it on a case that was pretty famous. We tested it on the Enron case.
nice. Okay.
And within 11 minutes, not only we find the smoking gun within that data set, but we found things that had never been discovered within the Enron case that were pretty scandalous.
Like what?
Oh man, what kind of audience are we talking about here? This is uh,
It's not made for children. Don't worry.
yeah. So one that really stands out to me is we found an email from a junior executive at Enron that was thanking his boss in a company email for arranging a five-way at a strip club uh, in
Nice.
Houston.
Nice. Nice. Enron was a classy place, huh?
Yeah, and and essentially it changed my life. Thanks so much for doing this, and it blew my mind. You know, these people never thought this data would see the day of light, and they're acting freely. They're saying things that they think are never going to come out, and that
Hmm.
raises a real parallel in the case that I had of where I found emails from executives that uh, very likely committed federal crimes
Mm.
that I found that never thought they would see the light of day,
Hmm.
that stole my trade secrets. I found the emails that a former sales manager of mine sold my customer list, for the offer of a job to turn it over. And now this hedge fund has all my customer list. And
Mm.
after they filed these lawsuits, they sent these lawsuits directly to my customers, which you can imagine this, right? One of my customers gets a federal lawsuit that's in school nutrition that's alleging me doing these bad things. They don't know any different.
Nope.
And what's your first reaction? You're going to say, "Look, I don't want to do business with this person. These are some terrible allegations."
Hmm. Absolutely. Um, and then then that like also directly, like I just have nightmares about how that would directly affect my business and my ability to provide for my family, things like that, where it's like, we're out here trying to, like, you and I both know entrepreneurship is not easy, right? This is probably the most difficult thing I've ever done. And as you like, and to have, and it takes, I always like, I've been always tell people like going from 0 to 1 is a huge lift. It takes so much work just to go from 0 to 1, let alone going from 1 to 5 and 5 to 10. Um, and to have it takes years to build it and do all that work, but it can get torn down like that.
Absolutely. Trust, we talked about that, people being skeptical and a trust barrier between, organizations wanting to use AI and put their most valuable secrets in AI.
Hmm.
The trust also goes to customers, right? If my customer loses trust in me, uh, it's over, right? Your cash flow, we do things, we build employees, right, around our businesses. Might have debt service. We've got obligations that we do forward looking things to lower the cost of doing business over the long run. And if
Hmm.
your revenue evaporates overnight, that business is DOA, dead
Hmm.
on arrival. And, it's going to have serious impacts. Uh,
Hmm.
and
Absolutely.
that's exactly what happened.
Hmm. Yeah, man. And then, but I mean, this amazing new product came out of it. This amazing new tool came out of it. Yeah, I know you've mentioned hallucinations a couple of times. How does FileStory handle hallucinations? Because I know it, like, the systems hallucinate, right? How do you guys handle that?
Yeah. So, how FileStory handles hallucinations and false positives. We do it through multiple layers of verification.
Hmm.
And first we've got this multi-agent approach. It provides natural error correction as different agents with specialized expertise evaluate the same information from different perspectives. And it kind of creates a system of checks and balances.
Hmm.
Um, Second, our coordination framework ensures that evidence based reasoning, requiring agents to ground their conclusions in specific documents and data points
Hmm.
that a human team member can like verify.
Right.
And I'm going to simplify that. Everything that we do points back to an original like document or
Nice.
our data point, right? And we found that that greatly increases accuracy and reduces hallucinations. And
Hmm.
then there's kind of a third point where the platform maintains a clear distinction between factually relevant and analytical interpretation. And it allows a human to easily validate the underlying evidence.
Hmm.
So there may be things like I'm going to that specific example in Enron, right? That's an unbelievable email to come
Yeah.
across.
Uh-huh.
And first my first inclination when I saw the summary that had been pulled out of this was BS, right?
Hmm.
I'm calling BS on that. There's no way somebody wrote an email like this.
Hmm.
And so what do you want to do? I want to verify it. And so we've created a system that I can very easily go back to the original document and look at it with my own eyes because I am all about trust but verify.
Hmm.
And if there's an outrageous email like that or a claim, I want to be able to verify it as a human because it may be my reputation on the line. I mean, there's a lot of instances in court cases where people put stuff that is completely untrue, cases that aren't true, and if it's good data in, good data out, and the same thing with bad data. And if there's a hallucination in there or an assumption that isn't true, it might be your career, it might be your company's reputation on the line. And so everything
You
has to
freedom.
be verified back to the original source. And if it's
Absolutely.
private data, it's probably accurate.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And you also like your freedom could be at risk if there's a lot, and I'm like I can understand why somebody might have been putting things like that in an email 25 years ago. Um, because the permanence of the internet hadn't like really set in.
Yep.
Um, I can't imagine. I can imagine people doing it now. I can't imagine why they would. Uh,
Yeah,
where
yeah, but I think it goes back to this is like there's something we human in the loop. A human
Yes,
has to be in the loop with AI. If
100%.
we turn if we turn AI loose, you really run into this dead reckoning problem of where the AI doesn't know where to stop, and it may just keep going. It's going to hallucinate. It's going to do way too much above its pay grade.
Hmm.
And the human in the loop is essential, especially for like enterprise AI. If a
Hmm.
company is going to use it, if somebody like me is going to use it, I want to have some sort of control over the process, and I want to be able to verify the work that it's doing to make sure that it's on the right path and it's not wasting resources doing the wrong thing.
Yeah, and I always I love that because I think what it reiterates is that and like we were talking about it a little bit before we started recording, but it reiterates that like they're still like it's not they don't I don't think AI systems have like real reasoning yet, and they don't understand. You have to very clearly, specifically define what you want them to do. And if you don't, it's going to get it wrong because it doesn't understand always what you're asking. And that's why like things like prompt engineering and understanding how to interact with these systems, but also having enough subject matter expertise of like what you're actually asking it to and analyze so that you can ask it to perform the right kinds of analyses. And like I told you just before, I'm reviewing a contract right now, and I, you know, I got very different results from asking an AI to like review it and look for clauses that could be problematic than a friend of mine who has a background in contracts, right? Because she's able to ask the right questions and get the right information pulled out and put forward in the right way that's presentable and digestible and makes sense.
And that actually hits on what why we're so excited, and actually based off our first patent around CETO, is
Hmm.
that we understood that, and sometimes humans don't know the right questions to ask. Right? We may have limited experience,
Hmm.
and we use a CETO can go through, can identify the problem, it can assemble the potential team needed to solve the task. It orchestrates a plan of how to approach that, and then it solves it, right? And it turns a swarm of agents onto that problem with experts to augment you to get results that you can trust.
Super cool, man. I love your tech, Luke. That's fantastic. That's really, really, really cool.
I
Um,
want to get it in your hands because I know what kind of problems it could solve for you. You know, I
mhm.
mean, like that's the beauty of that's what technology should be aiming for, is to solve real problems.
Yes, absolutely. I think so, like a theme that I've seen, and this is like tech, just like technology at large, is that they like to update apps and UIs and things like that. Not necessarily because the original one was broken, because they need to, but just because they want to update it, right? And I'm here for improved processes, right? And improved, but if you're just updating it to update it because you want it to be new, but you're not actually solving any fundamental issues, and it becomes, and like, like I don't know if you're a iPhone or an Android user, but that, like, when Apple released their latest major upgrade, I forget, I want to maybe 18, I don't remember what it is. um they like changed the photo app, the UI of the Photos app,
Mm,
and I find it harder to use now than it was before. Not because I don't understand how to use it, but because it's less logical to me, and they just, and like they changed it just to change it, and I don't see what value that created for anybody.
makes sense.
So, but I forget where I was going with that, Luke. I apologize, man. That was just a non sequitur about how change for change's sake seems like not necessarily the best thing. But
It's not necessarily always an improvement just to change things.
absolutely.
Sometimes we lose. Yeah, sometimes we lose. Your eye gets off the ball, right?
Mhm.
And while you may get excited about a particular feature, right, you lose functionality in the general overall sense.
Absolutely. So, what are some of the biggest lessons you've learned from as an entrepreneur, from building and scaling a couple of companies in vastly different spaces?
Oh man, what are some of the biggest lessons I've learned? So let's start with who you surround yourself with, right? You got to be really careful about the people you put in your corner. I'm a firm believer in habits. Habits really define who we are as people.
Hmm.
And if I have a bunch of bad habits, probably not going to be a really effective entrepreneur.
Hmm.
And uh, I've tried to surround myself with people of unquestionable integrity because I want to operate in a high trust society. I don't want to second guess the people that I'm operating with. I don't want to have to worry about them selling my trade secrets or breaking in, uh, breaking into a competitor's building and trying to do too much. There's so many things that we can do. Those are very specific answers that we can come back to, but because it's happened to me, right? I've had a corporate spy in one of my buildings
Mm.
that I found out in one of these cases, and if you surround yourself with people of high integrity and you have this high trust society, you can go so far and you're not second guessing things. You're not playing politics, right? You're
Mhm.
not worried about somebody maneuvering to get preferential treatment or to like get one over on you. So that's like one of my biggest things is like I try to surround myself with people of unquestionable integrity and world class talent. I
Mhm.
want to be around people that are really, really good at what they do because as an entrepreneur, right, when you start out as employee number one,
Yep.
you have to do everything.
Mhm.
It's really hard to trust and delegate work to somebody else. You run it like a dictatorship. Like
Hmm.
that's most small businesses. You're running a dictatorship. And
Hmm.
I don't want to do that. You and I have got way too much gray hair trying to do everything by ourselves.
Yeah, man. What was the so obviously, what was the thing that happened? What was the last straw for you where you realized that you had to let go? Like what brought you to the point where you like, oh, I can't do everything, and if I don't let go, it's gonna kill me or the company. What was that moment for you?
Stress,
Yeah,
right?
do it. That'll do
It's
it.
this it's the one thing we like, you get so much stress in your life trying to hold on to everything so tightly and play it perfectly. We're all going to make mistakes in entrepreneurship. It is a necessary part of growth to make mistakes. The thing is, like, if you can learn from them, not repeat them, uh, you're going to go really, really far. And so for me, it was probably 10 or 20 or 100 moments in my office of me wanting to pull my hair out and just saying, like, there's got to be a bigger way. And how you overcome that is through education, right? I ingested books, podcasts. I went through a program called Scale Up that was put on through Harvard Business School and the Kauffman Foundation. It was a local program to Kansas City, and it opened my mind and it helped me understand, like, look, if you want to be a really effective business leader, you have to delegate. And there is that. It's hard to let go. It's hard to trust people, to give them the rope to go and do things and trust that they're going to do it right. But you can't progress past a small business if you don't have those skills to.
Absolutely.
And then you got to have the talent to actually, right, when you delegate it, they got to be able to effectively go and execute on that at a high level. And so that kind of goes to my thing, right? Like those two things as a bedrock: high integrity and high talent. If I can
Mhm.
find those kind of people, I can solve any problem.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. And I think like whenever I hire somebody, because I've hired a lot of probably, I've hired a lot of people. I call it my hiring rule, I call it the 10-40-50 rule, right? I think anytime you hire somebody, 10% will be based on things like education, certifications, right? If you're hiring an attorney, what state do they need to be barred in? If you're hiring an accountant, do you need a CPA? Like these are hard pass fail skills, right? 40% is your hands-on experience and whether you can actually do the functions of the job. To me, like the other half is all personality and soft skills. It's are you going to show up early and stay late? Do you take it personally when you have to get a job done and does it take it personally if you're not going to get it done? Like are you going to deliver no matter what? Do you fit in with the organization? Do you get along with the people that you're going to be working very closely with? Because especially in small business and growing businesses, you work a lot and you spend more time with your employees than you do with most people. And so, and that's what makes a good employee, though, is like, are they going to be on time? Are they going to be there early? Or are they going to be one of those people that does a whole lot of work at not being productive? Because there are some out there that do that. Um, and like as long as you're hiring the right people, absolutely. I believe in hiring the right people and empowering them to do their job and then just getting out of their way.
And I
As
think
long as
the
you're hiring
I
the right
think the third thing, right? I want to align that employee for success for the long term by incentivizing them, right, to stay engaged, right? And I'm a
Mhm.
firm believer in. I want to share. Like, if we're going to go out on this long journey, you're going to get some of the spoils,
Yes.
right?
Hmm.
And so I want people to be intrinsically aligned to what we're doing, to be able to celebrate those big wins with me and
Hmm.
share the pain of the losses. Because doing it alone, it sucks,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like, no thanks. I've been there, right? I've
Hmm.
got 15 years of scars and gray hair. I want to do it with a team
Hmm.
uh, that's going to be there every step of the way.
And also as augmenting skill sets, right? Like I think that that's a big thing is that yes, you need to do everything when you're small, but just because you need to do everything when you're small as the owner, doesn't mean that you're the right person to do it as you grow. And like my goal is to replace myself out of every job, right? And then I want to become irrelevant because then I've built the right organization. I've put the right people in place, the right pieces in place, and then you build the team, you get them, you sync them up, and then you're working not in the business where you're delivering things, but you're working on the business and you're making the business better. And like that to me is the fun part, right? The fun part is what are we doing from a strategy perspective? How are we going to go ahead and crack whatever the nut is? How are we going to solve this problem? How are we going to, make sure that everybody's properly aligned? How are we going to be looking at, offering trainings and reskilling and upskilling to make sure that everybody within the organization continues to maintain relevant skill sets, learn what's new out there, and especially in a time like this where AI is changing so rapidly. Um, how are you going to even maintain that if you're not investing your time in it? And so like I like the strategy side more than the delivery side. And, my goal is to just sit in that space eventually. I'm not there yet though, Luke.
I want to be surrounded with people that are way smarter than me,
Yeah.
right?
Oh yeah.
Put them in a position to succeed, like you're saying, right? Like,
Mhm.
let me focus on what I'm good at, and put people that are way more talented in a position so that, man, the quality of life, it matters, right? Business is a marathon. This is not a 100-yard dash.
Mhm.
Uh, there's a Japanese hotel that's been around for how many generations?
I want to say I want to say been around for 1400 years or so,
Yeah.
150-ish generations in the same family. I want to say 153, and I don't know why but that just feels right.
I, you know exactly what I'm talking about,
I
right? But
do.
like
I do.
business can go on for infinity,
Hmm.
and uh, there's things that we want to do. I want to stay married, right?
Hmm.
I want to have a good quality of life. I want to enjoy it, and the other thing that you said, uh, I spend so much of my time in business. My friends are primarily who I'm working with, right? These people I'm developing relationships with. If
Hmm.
we're as successful as I think we're going to be in this space, these
Hmm.
are the people I want to celebrate with. These are the people I want to go on vacations with,
Hmm. These
that
are
I
the
want to
people
spend time with.
you want to help them materially change their lives and the trajectory of their lives because you can do that in this space.
Absolutely.
Yeah, man, it's really cool. Yeah, it's fascinating. I think, what you guys are doing is incredible. I think you're doing some really, really, really cool stuff with technology. And I'm really looking forward to seeing kind of where File Story goes. Like who are some ideal folks for you to work with? Are there industries that you want to be in? You know,
Yeah. So
kind of
so
where are
let's
you
talk
going?
about like where we're strong at. And
Yes.
right now, there's some benchmarks that we've run,
Hmm.
and let's talk about where FileStory is. We're literally coming out of stealth this month,
Hmm.
right? We've been very hidden for the last year and a half, and we've been getting patents lined up. We've been doing pilots. We've been rapidly upskilling where we're at, and so we're coming out of the gate like kind of. This is the first public podcast I've done in maybe 4 or 5 years.
Well, I'm
Uh,
honored that you chose me, man.
I'm
It's
happy to
fuck,
be
it's
here.
cool, dude.
Yeah,
It's
but it's what are we good at? Well, we've done some benchmarks, and I'm about like I can see new tech, and I think as guys, what I've noticed is we get really excited about technology just for the sake of technology. We see something cool, right? We're like, oh my gosh, like that's so amazing. It's going to change the world, but we don't there's nothing beyond that, right? And so you've got to test it, right? I've got to have metrics to understand what that looks like. And so one of our early benchmarks tests that we did on our system was around Salesforce's benchmark tests. And some of the numbers we got back are completely unbelievable. Uh, Completeness score 3.99 out of 4.0.
wow.
Uh, it's the highest score in the world. We're
Hmm.
one of the most accurate systems in the world because we really dug into AI. We took our time and we have the talent to tweak and build a system that's going to put out results that are completely accurate based on that always point back to the original source, that don't hallucinate.
Hmm.
And so, what does that lead us to? It leads us to fields like legal,
Hmm.
leads us compliance, medical, enterprise,
Hmm.
financial, right?
Hmm.
Sectors that you can't miss a decimal point. You can't get a word wrong. You
Hmm.
can't afford to hallucinate because your reputation's on the line. And so really that's where we're looking for customers in sectors like financial. We've got a lot of financial companies that are really interested in what we're building. We've got legal companies, medium-sized law firms, big law firms. We've got government entities that are really excited about what we're building, and you got to be accurate to be in those things. And if that's where we're really, really strong at, and the workflow process built around people,
Hmm.
uh, you know, it's kind of a big target, but it all overlaps because they all face the same fundamental problems. And
Hmm.
at their core, we got to be accurate with no hallucinations, and it's got to be really secure.
Hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's fantastic, man. And so, really looking to be in industries where like detail and accuracy are incredibly key. One of the things that I was thinking about a little earlier in the call when you were talking was that, um, every single state has different laws. And there's different state laws, and so I'm sure that you guys can, create agents to essentially ingest state by state and understand what goes on specifically in the state, how it differs, how the federal laws play, like because that gets very complex, right?
It does.
Um,
And the details really matter in the industries that we're targeting.
mhm, absolutely. And so man, I have one more question for you, Luke, and this is it's an entrepreneur based question, but I know you've had a lot of people come to you and ask you for advice when starting a company over the years. What's the one piece of advice you always give when somebody asks if they should do something?
So I look at this in a couple of aspects. The first
Mhm.
one is we've talked about this is a marathon. You and I are in a marathon race, and we're going to spend a lot of time. We're going to take time away from our family, away from activities we want to do, hobbies that we want to be involved in. You better be passionate about it. You better really matter to you. And it's easy for me because this really matters to me. I went through the ringer in these federal lawsuits, and so AI became an integral part of my life, and I became very, very passionate about it. And that passion will carry you through many dark times, many frustrations. You got to have passion about what you're doing to get out of bed because money isn't going to get a lot of people out of bed when it's that dire. You have to care about it, and you have to be naturally interested to dig deeper than a surface level.
Hmm.
So that's one, right? Find something that you really, really care about. And if you really care about something, you're going to understand where the biggest pain points are. And to me, you have to solve real pain for real people. Uh, our customers, they vote with their wallets,
Hmm.
right? If they don't like your product, they're not giving you money. You don't have a company. You don't have a product that anybody wants to buy. And
Hmm.
so my thing is like get passionate about an industry and solve somebody's real pain. And if you can do both of those things and then build a team around you that can support, the vision, the direction that you want to go, you're going to be successful.
Absolutely. No, I love that, man. I love that. And before we do wrap up, anything else you'd like to say? Any points I missed? Any questions I should have asked Luke that I failed to ask?
Uh, I think we had a really fun conversation.
Hmm.
I would say to anybody that's listening to this and says, "Man, I want to know more." We're firing up our social media channels. We're going to be posting demo videos. We're going to be posting uh, uh, examples. I want to show people, like we did a lot of telling this episode, right? And I'm
Hmm.
very show don't tell. And so you're going to start to see examples of us go through things like maybe the new JFK files that are going to get released.
Hmm.
FileStory would be a perfect platform to go through that and see what's really in these files. It's going to take people, most people don't have the time to go through that. I've
Hmm.
got the tools to go through the JFK files and maybe find some interesting stuff that nobody knew. There may be other, large data sets we can go through really quickly and give hidden insights into. Uh, we've got a huge revamp coming, with our website. We are looking for additional customers that want a competitive advantage in AI. Because
Hmm.
I'm going to tell you right now, with what I've seen with AI and what its capabilities are, you're going to be left behind if you aren't integrating AI into your company right now because your competitors will. And you kind of have three choices. You can try and do it yourself, right? And
Hmm.
you and I can try and do my taxes myself. I can try and become a lawyer and fight my own legal battles myself, right? The
Hmm.
results probably aren't going to be that great.
Hmm.
Uh, I can do nothing and get left behind,
Hmm.
or I can trust a third party to try and help me navigate that, like I would a CPA.
Hmm.
And that's what I see FileStory as is a uh, we're your friendly AI company that can help you navigate massive problems within your organization and unlock the potential of all this private data you have to help your organization make better decisions and be more competitive. So you want to reach out? I'll talk to you.
Dude, I love it, Luke. I love it. I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. It's a very impressive story, but also sharing a lot about your passion and kind of why you're here, why you're doing this. And again, man, really thank you so much for coming.
Nick, thanks for the time. Appreciate it. Glad to be here.
Thanks for listening to Robots and Red Tape, everybody. I hope you're having a great day.